Welcome to this meeting of Mid Suffolk Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Sarah Mansell. I will be chairing the meeting today. This meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded except where there are confidential or exempt items. If any member of the public attending this meeting objects to being filmed, please advise us immediately and we will ensure that they're not included in the filming. Members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you are intending to do so, please could you inform the committee clerk. May I please request that mobile phones are on silent or switched off and that your laptops are switched to silent. If you hear the fire alarm, please leave the building immediately via a fire exit and make your way to the assembly point at Ipswich Town Football Ground. First of all, there are some introductions. On my left, we have the Area Planning Manager, Gemma Walker, and behind her, our Legal Advisor, Ian Dupre. We have the Case Officer, Bron Curtis, who will be joining us on Teams, and I have Governance Officers, Alicia Norman and Beth Webb, to keep the meeting working properly. And we have the members who will be making the decision on the planning application. Can I move to the agenda, please? Apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Lawrence with Councillor Marriott substituting. Thank you.
Item number 2, to receive declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest and other registrable or non-registrable interests by members. Any to declare? Thank you. Item 3, declarations of lobbying. I have certainly been lobbied, and I'm assuming that all members of the committee have been lobbied. Is that true? Everyone's had emails, videos, documents. And did you get them as well, Councillor Marriott? Yes. Yeah, thank you. Item number 4, declarations of personal site visits. Are there any to declare? Councillor Marriott?
Yes, I visited the site, yes.
Thank you. Item number 5, MPL 24-2, confirmation of the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 12th of March 2025. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? Could I have a proposer, Councillor Morgan, and seconded by Councillor Haddingham? Thank you. The Governance Officer will now conduct the electronic vote to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now open for you in ModGov. Thank you, Chair. That is 8 votes for, so that is unanimous.
Thank you. Those minutes of the meeting have now been confirmed and will be signed later on this evening. Item number 6, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So then we move to item 7, which is the schedule of planning applications. We just have the one planning application to deal with today, and that is DC 2405090, land adjacent to Bullen Lane, Bramford. And I will now invite Bron Curtis to introduce the application to the committee. Over to you, Bron.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening all. I'll start just with a summary of tabled papers that you've had, which is the response from your communities team officer, raising no objection, just acknowledging the concerns of the community and also the community benefits package that's on offer. Also to make a response to the submission you've received earlier today from Birstall Parish Council, in which they pick out a number of alleged omissions in the report. So I'm just going to go through those for you so that you can understand my response to those. The first is to do with the Scottish Power Renewables objection. That is in the report on page 25, but I can also confirm that that has now been withdrawn. I've received a an email from Scottish Power earlier today. The second one, the landscape officer advice, is also in the report. It is summarised on pages 23, 24, 34 and 35. The reference to Bullenwood is also included in the report. That is on pages 27 and 35. The third section of the letter from Birstall Parish Councils goes through a number of the individual points raised in the report. So just to go through those quickly for you. The 40-year application, that is not uncommon for any energy developments, just to reflect the expected life expectancy of technology. The worst case scenario assessment that's referred to, my reading of that section, it appears as if that is opinion and rhetorical questions, but I'm more than happy to take questions about that if the committee would like any more information. The reference to hazardous substances, you may recall we've dealt with this at previous committee meetings. Hazardous substances consent is separate from the planning regime and the planning decision making process. The comment regarding flood risk refers to LP25. I believe that might be an error. LP25 doesn't mention the need for a flood risk assessment. LP27 does mention the need for the cumulative effects of other minor development, but there is otherwise no reference anywhere in your JLP to the need for cumulative flood risk assessment. Again, happy to take questions on that. And just to confirm that you'll see in your papers that the lead local flood authority as the technical consultee on that matter was satisfied, and I can confirm that washdown has is contained in the attenuation basin on site, which has a controlled outflow in the case of washdown in an incident being polluted to prevent pollution of surrounding groundwater. The NFCC, the National Fire Chief Council guidance, is actually still in draft, and it is the 2024 version. The 2022 version was superseded by the consultation document in 2024, and the 2024 document becomes the current draft guidance. The latest technology, I think this is possibly a point for the applicant, but just to say that if members would find comfort, if they feel minded to grant permission, we can certainly add to the recommended condition number 3 to ensure that when we agree the final specification of the technology to be installed, that we get a written confirmation that it complies with the latest guidance and regulations at the time. Safety information. The full details of the submission from the applicant is on the file and obviously available to members of the committee, and it's been summarised in the report for conciseness. Similarly with landscape, the full representation from Birstall Parish Council is available on the file, but actually the additional comments that were received were added to the summary, which is on your page 21 of the report. And then the last point there about noise impacts on users of the right of way. I can confirm that users of the right of way cannot experience statutory nuisance. That's been confirmed by your environmental protection officer. So they're not a noise sensitive receptor in the same way that residential property is. And also, just for context, 55 decibels is comparable to the normal level of conversation, but a 55 decibel continuous hum is not as intrusive as an intermittent noise such as conversation. So just so you have that information as well. And then just a correction, please, on your page 26, the fencing, I have listed in the details of the proposed development that the fencing is palisade fencing. That has actually been changed during the course of the application in response to the landscape officer's advice, and it will now be mesh fencing. I have a picture of that to show you in the presentation. So if I move on to that now. So the application site is in the parish of Bramford, very close to the administrative boundary with Baber District and the parish of Birstall. It is at the end of the Bullen Lane Highway, which is a designated right-of-way and no-through highway to traffic. At the end of that road, there is the National Grid substation, which is close to the site, and also a number of other pieces of energy infrastructure in the surrounding area, which I'll show to you in a moment. The application site is shown orange on this aerial map. The main part of the site, get my pointer options correct, is this sort of triangularish, rectangularish piece in the centre. And then there are also areas of land to be used for cabling to connect into the national grid substation here. And then there is this section at the bottom which is marking out the route of a permissive right of way, which is to be offered as part of the application. Just a slightly wider view there so you can see the context with the main part of Bramford village over here and Birstall. So there's your red line. Just to point out on this image, you can see Bullen Hall Farm, Grade 2 listed building, and Fidgens Farm, Grade 2 listed building, which are relevant when considering LP 25.3, your Heritage Officer's Advice, and the Alternative Sites Assessment section of the report. The constraints map here shows you the rights of way. There's quite an extensive network in this area, including bridleway and footpaths, and you can see how the proposed permissive route follows what is a desired walked route and links into the surrounding right of way. So it is not proposed to be designated as part of the application, but should the community wish to do that, that's available to anybody to make an approach to Suffolk County Council. The desired route has to be in use for 20 years in order for a claim application to be made, but that can be done. There's nothing to stop that happening. So the application itself is for a battery energy storage system. These installations are electrical installations, a series of batteries and associated equipment that you can see laid out in the image on this block plan. Battery storage systems are an integral part of the country's transition to decarbonised grid. They form part of the Clean Power 30 action plan, which we're looking for a 5-fold increase in battery storage systems across the UK. The way that these sort of installations work is to store excess energy when it is generated at periods of peak wind or sunshine, for example, from renewable sources like wind turbines and solar panels, to store that when it's not needed by the grid and to reduce losses of energy generation, and to release it back to the grid at periods of higher demand and lower generation. So, for example, at night when it's not windy. So they are often located either next to generation sources or next to transmission or distribution sources, such as in this case. The development itself includes a number of pieces of equipment, which I'll show you through the next slides, including some substation equipment to transfer the energy in the batteries through to the cabling that goes to the national grid substation, but also areas for water storage and attenuation, internal roadways. There's fencing, which I mentioned earlier, and I'll show you a picture of, and 2 accesses. So from the existing access point in this corner here, and secondary access for emergency purposes here. And you can see the pink line, you can see where the current right of way crosses the site, and that there is an offset from the right of way to where the built development will be, which is approximately 50% of this part of the site, the remainder being left for biodiversity net gain and landscape mitigation and planting. So just to give you a little bit more context here of where the permissive right of way route, it's in blue, it's dashed line blue, and the white are the existing designated routes. And then you can see from this aerial picture a bit clearer where the substation is. You can also see one of the existing permitted battery storage system sites under construction here. There is another one that has been permitted in this space here. And this block of woodland is Bullen Wood. So this image just gives you an idea of some of the other applications that developments that are relevant for the consideration of cumulative effect. So the 2 other battery developments that I just pointed out there in the centre. You also have the UNESCO battery over at Brook Farm here, and the ENSO solar and battery scheme is permitted over here, and the EDF solar, which is solar only, which is under construction currently up at Ty Lane. This next image also shows you, it's a bit more complicated because it shows you development consent order developments, and that includes the East Anglia 1 substation, the East Anglia 3 converter station, so that's Scottish Power Renewables, the developer in both of those cases, and the route of the Bramford to Twinstead Overhead Lines project. So running you through some of the equipment that the development will comprise. This is an indicative plan of the battery units, which will look something like this, although they are proposed to be finished in a green colour. Spare parts in a shipping container, which is pretty standard shipping container that you'll be familiar with already. This is inverter equipment and skid equipment, and that is what those pieces of equipment look like. And then again, similar to a shipping container sort of structure for the switch room, and then the substation equipment and water tank and pump equipment and infrared CCTV poles. And then this is an image of the example fencing that has been changed from palisade. I'm now going to take you through the photographs of the site. So you're just looking here at the point of access, which is just in this corner, running with the footpath running along the side of this hedge, which encloses this telecoms mast, and EDF have some equipment in there. So this is on Bullen Lane. And then turning round to look southeast, so from Bullen Lane looking across the site, you can see there's a little bit of vegetation, but it's pretty sparse along here. And then looking from the access on Bullen Lane back towards Bramford Village, so looking east, and you can just see Bullen Lane is running along there. Fidgeon's Farm is on the far side of this planting here. And then looking across the site to the south, looking southeast and looking east across the site. So you can see that it's open, relatively open plateau landscape here. It's shallow valley side, so it's slightly undulating, but it's fairly open to views, particularly from the rights of way which run across all of this landscape. Looking east again, Fidgeon's Farm, roughly where my pointer is there, behind those trees and hedges. And then here's the right of way. You can see the right of way finger mark. You can see Bullenwood. So this is now looking southwest, turning around to the other direction. That's Bullenwood. The location for the other battery developments in this space here, and you can see the pylons going into the National Grid substation in the background there. That's a little further up the right of way to look, so looking west across the sites for the other battery storage developments, and the other one under the last one under construction over there, and the pylons for the substation. Turning around and looking back northwards towards Bullen Lane. Bullen Lane's just running along here. Looking straight across now where the other battery developments are going to go, and the substation. That's another view similar of that. And a little further down the right of way, a little bit sort of closer to the edge of Bullenwood here, looking northwards back towards Bullen Lane in the far background there. And that's the end. So you'll see in the report, let me just go back to, let's go back to this one. It's not going to do it, is it? I'm going to have to go onwards. Hang on. So you'll see in the report that I've set out the various issues in the normal manner. The principle of development is generally supported by national policy and other material considerations, including Clean Power Action Plan. Your policy LP25 provides for energy storage systems, but does ask for an assessment of alternatives where the development would be considered to affect the setting of certain assets, including listed buildings. In this case, your heritage officer has advised that there may be glimpsed views, particularly in winter when there's poor vegetation cover of one of the two listed buildings that I mentioned before. So on that basis, the applicant has carried out an alternative site assessment, and you can see my summary of that in your papers. That also helps to address the policy regarding best and most versatile land in the joint local plan, which also asks developers to prioritise the use of lower quality land where possible. This is grade 3A. I'll just get my numbers on that for you. Sorry, 2, 3A and 3B. And I think in the report I've got the numbers for you and the amount of land. I've also had a look carefully at all of the comments that we've received from the local communities and the parish councils. There are a number of objections on various points, which you'll see summarised in the report and dealt with in the assessment sections, not least matters of safety, public safety, particularly to do with the potential for fire incidents for these types of development. And there have been a couple of recent incidents reported which add to concerns about the type of installations. Landscape impact as well. You'll see the advice from your landscape officer and how the applicant has responded to initial concerns and the point at which we've got to. There is some tension with your policy on landscape terms, particularly as regards the requirement of that policy LP17 to protect and enhance. There's no getting away from the fact that this will certainly change the character of the landscape, and it will introduce an industrial and incongruous feature, but you'll see how I've dealt with that in terms of the context of the surrounding area and the other industrial development that already exists in the landscape, as well as the potential for mitigation of some of the visual effects of the development, and then the weighing in the planning balance at the end that there are material considerations in terms of the Clean Power Action Plan and the priority for decarbonisation of the grid to be granting permission. I won't run through all of the issues that are in the report because no doubt you've had a look at that, and I will be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Hallingham.
Questions, Bron. So if I can just have a few to start off. What is the? I know it says in the report that the risk of fire is very low, but what is actually the probability of one of these, bursting into flames? How likely is it? Is there a ratio, or that's obviously the number one concern for the parishes.
So there's nothing that is published as part of planning guidance in that respect, but the applicant is in the room with you, I believe, and I believe they have their fire safety expert with them, so it's probably better for them to answer that as being closer to how the technology works.
Thank you. Do you have another question?
And so also the fact that it's a no-through road. So what other, I know you run over it quickly in the report, but what other things are further down the road? I think there was another couple of battery storage, but what else is further down the road? If the road was, if there was a fire and the road was shut because of the smoke, what else is further down the road that wouldn't be able to get through to their sites?
So the applicant has included in their emergency response information and site safety information plume modelling. So in the case of an incident, the batteries are positioned far enough from the road in accordance with the National Fire Chief Council's guidance that the plume would not affect the ongoing operation of any of the other installations. Let me just try and find them. There we go. So you've got another battery installation in this location here and another one here, and then the National Grid substation, and then this access road, pointer, let me make my pointer that way. So this access road here leads to the EA1, East Anglia 1 substation and the compound for the East Anglia 3 converter station. That was the basis, or part of the basis, of the concern raised by Scottish Power Renewables, that they were unsure whether, if there were an incident, there would be any impact on the safety of their sites and the continual operation of their sites. But the applicant has been in discussion with them and has provided information to confirm that that would not be the case. So the highway would be passable in the case of an incident. It's, depending on the nature of the incident, it's possible that the fire service would restrict access, so would stop people from passing and repassing whilst they were responding to an incident or whilst the incident was ongoing. The bridleway does come out at this end, so there is access on foot and then onto to this access track and onto the road here at Birstall. But again, the fire safety specialist for the applicant will probably be able to give you more detail about the practicality of that.
Did you want to come back?
Thanks. So the end of the road is just literally just past the actual. Where is the end of the road? You show me.
This is the end of the road, just at the access point for the National Grid substation. That is where it turns into an unmade track where it's just bridleway. So it's accessible by horse or by foot or by bicycle, but not by motorised vehicle.
Thank you. Councillor Elkin.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions as well. Bron, I had another fire safety question. My understanding is if there is a fire, then the method is to sort of not try and put it out, but to cool the surrounding containers. And I think there's a sort of couple of hours worth of water on site. But there's lots of reports in the news of these fires lasting many hours, sometimes days. So I was wondering, is there enough water to deal with that? And I think also the idea is any water that's picked up contaminants would go into a holding pond rather than into the ground and then into the aquifer. But if you've only got a attenuation basin that can hold a couple of hours water and you might need several days worth of water, how does that all work? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Again, probably the detail of that is probably best put to the applicant's fire safety specialist. Sorry to keep palming it off on them, but they will be far closer to the detail of this. I understand that they have a professional background in fire service and emergency response, so they will be far more familiar. My understanding is from the submission documents that the most common incident is where, and bearing in mind that the equipment is designed to have inbuilt detection and suppression, so detection of any fluctuation in heat or anything that's not working as expected, so that can be responded to, so the unit can be shut down. Inbuilt suppression, so that there is a way of suppressing any additional heat or incident within the cell itself. And then the expectation in most cases, if there were to be an incident, would be to let it burn out without the need for any intervention. And that has been what's happened in some recent incidents that have been reported elsewhere. There is obviously the possibility for spread to another unit or to surrounding vegetation. And that's where the water comes into effect to dampen down and cool the surrounding area, to prevent spread to surrounding land, etc. And you're right that the attenuation basin has a controlled outflow, so if in the event that the water is to be used for cooling, and that might then contain pollutants, it can be contained within that basin. In terms of the hours needed, if I could defer to the applicant specialist on that, please. But in the meantime, I'll have a look through the submission documents because I don't have that off the top of my head. Sorry.
Did you want to come back, Councillor?
Thank you. It was a slightly, I've got a couple of other questions as well, but I don't want to take up too much time. It was about the best and most versatile agricultural land. I think about 95% of this 8 hectares is grade 2 or grade 3A. And I think, is it LP15 says that that's to be avoided, if at all possible. So I was just wondering how you've squared, how the applicant has squared the circle in terms of looking for other land to use for this.
Thank you. So page 29 of your report deals with the loss of best and most versatile agricultural land. So you're absolutely right. We've got approximate 8 hectare site. Grade 2 land is 3.8 hectares, so about half of that. Grade 3A, about 5 hectares, 3B making up the rest. So the whole site is considered to be best and most versatile land for the purposes of Policy LP 15 and the MPPF. Policy LP 15 requires development to avoid BMV where possible, and that other land should be prioritised, which is similar objective to the MPPF. So, as I explained before, the applicant has provided an alternative sites assessment for the purposes of LP25, but it's equally applicable to LP15 when we're looking at how they've prioritised the search for land. They are restricted to a 2 kilometre radius or thereabouts from the point of connection. So they have an offer of connection to the National Grid substation at Bullen Lane. That is their point of connection. So they have done a search within a 2 kilometre radius of that, which then allows for the viability of and operational effectiveness of the development in terms of both the cost of cabling for any greater length of connection, but also transmission losses over that length as well. And this matter has been dealt with recently by the Planning Inspectorate at the inquiry for the Badley solar development. The alternative site assessment there dealt with the impact on heritage assets, but it's the same principle for your LP25-3. And there was basically it was accepted that the viability arguments and the transmission losses arguments were reasonable, as were the single point of connection and the offer that exists to be reasonable factors in the alternative sites. Having looked at that and the alternative sites assessment for that application, what's been submitted for this application is comparable, and so it would be unreasonable to draw any other conclusion than the alternative sites assessment is acceptable, meaning that there are no alternatives which are any better in terms of impact on heritage assets or best and most versatile agricultural land.
Thank you. Councillor Patchett.
Thank you, Chair. There are a couple of conditions from ecology and from public rights of way. Are we sort of minded to go ahead with those conditions if planning was granted? Are we looking at imposing those sort of, well, not imposing, but having those conditions if permission is granted to satisfy ecology and to satisfy PROW?
Yeah, on your page 37 begins the recommendation. You can see the ecology conditions at 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12, and rights of way conditions starting at 19 and 20. The recommendation continues on to page 37, but those are the ones that you just asked about, Councillor.
Did you want to come back, or is that it?
No, that's fine. No, I just wanted to
Are
sort
there
of
any
steer to where it
other
was.
questions? Councillor Marriott?
Hello, Brana. As you've said, there are other battery storage sites being proposed quite nearby. I just wondered whether any work has been done to actually sort of assess the need for these type of sites, maybe the current need and possibly future need, so that we aren't sort of flooded unnecessarily with these types of works. Thank you.
Thank you. The latest information that we have that is a material consideration to the determination of a planning application is the Clean Power 30 Action Plan published by the Labour government at the end of the last year, which states that we are currently under-resourced in terms of storage facilities, and there is a need for a 5-fold increase from what is already installed.
Thank you. Councillor Hardingham.
Can you comment on the remarks about noise measurement point 2? I spent some time looking at the noise report, and if the noise measurements didn't actually take place at measurement point 2 at Bullen Hall, is the report really valid?
The report has been considered by your Senior Environmental Protection Officer, who is satisfied with both the method and the conclusions of the assessment, and the recommendations for attenuation. I note the point that came to us today about whether or not that position was where the assessment was carried out from. I think that's probably best answered by the applicant, because they will have done that work, just to confirm that they did do what they said they did.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Hardingham?
No, I don't think I've got another comment on that, although obviously if the applicant said that it took place, then they will repeat that, even if the owner of the property didn't know it actually happened.
I think all we can do is ask them. That's opinion, otherwise. Are there any other questions? Councillor Warboys, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Hardingham.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you talk about installation according to the latest guidance and equipment safety measures. Is that what meant by the Rochdale approach? Is that something different?
Yes, so the Rochdale envelope principle is usually used for EIA development and development consent order applications, so NSIPs usually. So usually larger projects where there's less certainty over the scheme design at the consenting stage. But it is a legitimate method to use for determinations under the Town and Country Planning Act as well. In this case, and in previous cases that the committee have heard for energy developments, the market for the technology is so fast moving and evolving that to fix the technology now would mean that the operator would potentially be missing out on having something which was potentially safer or more effective in operation when they actually came to install it. So by giving this degree of flexibility, we have the maximum parameters in terms of height, etc. We have the indicative appearance and layout, but the recommendation on page 37 for condition 3 will secure the final details of all of that equipment. And what I was suggesting in response to the concern raised by Birstall Parish Council is that we just add to that there is confirmation that the equipment complies with the latest guidance and regulations in terms of safety at that time, because it may be the permission is being the recommendation is the permission is granted for a period of 4 years, so there's potential for a couple of years to pass before we get discharge of condition submission under that. So the technology could advance quite significantly in that time. As with guidance and regulation, you never know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you want to ask the applicant. Are there any other questions from members? Councillor Elkin.
Thank you. Are there any sort of UK-wide safety regulations of battery energy storage setups at the moment? You said it's a sort of emerging, fast-moving technology.
There's lots actually, and the majority of them come under. So there is some guidance by the British government, but then there are, so the Department for Energy and Energy Security and Net Zero published something. There is also a series of regulations and guidance that governs the electrical installation industry, and these fall into that category. So these types of equipment will be controlled by various things like the International Electrotechnical Commission, which is an international standardisation body, Health and Safety Executive. There's various guidance for battery energy systems operators on there as well. In terms of planning guidance, the information is pretty limited. It changed the year before last, in which it is now a requirement for the local fire and rescue service to be a consultee at the application stage and for the developer to engage with them. And I can confirm that that's happened. You can see in your papers the response from Suffolk County Council, and that the scheme must be designed having regard to the National Fire Chief Council's guidance. And you can see in the safety report and emergency response plan, there's a matrix in there how the applicant is demonstrating they've complied with each of the guidance in the NFCC.
Thank you. I've just got one question. I just want to clarify. Because we have the flexibility that the tech is moving on and batteries are getting smaller and more efficient, if we were to grant this planning permission, would it be the maximum volume capacity or the maximum power energy storage, or the maximum sort of power in or out that we are fixing in such that if the tech moves on and you get the same capacity of battery energy storage but in a smaller volume, is it the energy capacity that we're restricting or the actual physical size of the batteries?
The physical size of the batteries is what's restricted by the condition 3. But if members have a concern about that, we have on other developments, mostly for solar or those that are solar and battery hybrid, we have specified a maximum capacity in the description of the development with a corresponding condition to limit that. We could speak to the applicant about that. I did mention it to them earlier in the week. The proposal here is for a 400 megawatt capacity battery energy storage system. We could add that into the description with the applicant's agreement, and we could add a condition. So you may remember the EDF Tie Lane application. That's probably the most recent that you've dealt with, I think. There is a condition there to limit that to 49.9. That was partly because above 50 megawatts becomes an NZIP and is a different consenting regime. That's not the same for batteries. Batteries are not part of the Planning Act and the DCO regime. But if members felt that that was necessary to safeguard some of the impacts that are not safeguarded by other conditions, then I believe that would be reasonable to ask the applicant to agree to the description.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from members to the planning officer? If not, then I'll move on to the public speakers. Now we have this application site is in Bramford Parish, but we do have a representative from Birstall Parish Council here. And there was going to be a representative from Bramford Parish Council, but they are now unfortunately unable to come. So I'm going to first of all ask Councillor James Caston, who is the ward member for Bramford, to read out a written comment from Bramford Parish Council, and then I'm going to go to William Peterson from Birstall Parish Council, and then I'm going to invite questions from members to the Parish Council representative. So first of all, we've got Bramford Parish Council's comments read out by Councillor James Caston, and I will time you for your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll get going then, because I haven't read this yet, so I don't know if it's going to be 3 minutes. Whilst Bramford Parish Council and its community accepts the need for and supports renewable energy, however, not at any cost and disregard to the community hosting it, the cumulative impact of Bramford substation and the development it is attracting in this immediate area is becoming overwhelming for the community, causing industrialisation and destroying our wildlife habitats, agricultural fields and our beautiful countryside that attracts locals and visitors to the area enjoying the vast network of footpaths. Bramford Parish Council are concerned with the Rochdale envelope approach being followed. We appreciate it and assist the developer with the technical uncertainty during the application process. However, as the environmental impact is not fully defined, it makes it difficult for Bramford Parish Council and other professionals to assess the environmental impact of a development that is not fully defined. We can only consider the worst case scenario to determine if the project is acceptable. The developer has not claimed in his planning application under biodiversity and geological conservation that there are any protected or priority species on site. This is clearly untrue and causes us concern. They also deny any important habitats. However, it is clear that there are such as to survey identifying these protected creatures. This area is extremely sensitive and includes wildlife sites and nearby ancient woodland. We support the ecologists' comments and wish to see these issues resolved before any application is granted. It is essential we protect the habitat of the great crested newt and dormouse as a protected species. It is our duty to do so to the best of our abilities. We are concerned as to why a dormouse licence has not been obtained and wish to have an explanation of this, or have the developer produce one as requested by the ecologist. With recent fires at similar sites in 2025, we have great concerns regarding the safety aspect of the project and the contamination into local waterways. Preventing environmental contamination is essential, and we do not feel, as this application stands, this application is robust to this matter. Bramford Parish Council has been deeply invested in a recent solar development close to the site, with community engagement being at the heart of the project, involved in discussions of tree species and other matters. Whilst we request refusal of this application, if it is passed, we would like again to be a consultee for said matters and continue our work with this application, ensuring the site is completed to a high standard. We expect the correct tree species, size of plants, etc., ensuring our surroundings, our community and all that lives within it is protected, maintained or enhanced. Bramford Parish Council supports the comments made by our neighbours Birstall and Sproughton Parish Council in their objections registered and agree with their concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. That was only just over the 3 minutes, so you did well if you hadn't practiced before. So I'm now going to ask William Peterson from Birstall Parish Council, and you've got 3 minutes to make your comments. Thank you. Press the right-hand button on the... That's it.
Thank you, Chair, Councillors. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm representing Birstall Parish Council, but I'm also the owner of the nearest property south of this development, and I know the area extremely well. We strongly object to this application. Firstly, let's be clear, BES developments are not critical national infrastructure, although installations further up Bullen Lane are critical national infrastructure. This is a commercial project designed to generate profits through arbitrage. Clearstone has cherry-picked this site with self-imposed restrictions to exploit grid connections, not for the public need. There must be more suitable alternatives, brownfield sites, locations away from prime agricultural land, sites away from ancient woodland, sites that aren't elevated and exposed with far-reaching views, areas that are not at saturation point through cumulative impact, and sites with more than one narrow access route. Secondly, fire safety concerns have not been properly addressed. The devil's in the detail here, and from what we can see, Clearstone have only assessed fire and toxic plumes from the risk of one battery unit. We've calculated that their proposal includes a staggering 600 battery units, 8 times the number at the nearest battery site. We calculate 750 battery containers in close proximity if we include the other sites. What happens if there is a runaway fire? At the Pigeon battery site, we saw councillors assume that there was sufficient water available in the event of a fire risk. We calculate, as has been said here, that there's 2 hours worth of water available, and the recent example of actual BES fires shows that 24 hours minimum of firefighting is required. Finally, key objections from Birstall have been ignored. Birstall Parish Council have submitted detailed analysis of this application. However, serious concerns and omissions in areas in, for example, the landscape impact and noise assessment have been made. Planning inspectors refused a safer site this year in Hawkchurch, Devon. We urge you, don't approve this application until every objection has been addressed and worst case planning and mitigation has been completed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from members to the representative from Birstall Parish Council? Any questions? Thank you very much. We don't have an objector, we don't have a supporter, but we do have the applicant, Simon Rothwell. So you can now make your representation, and I will also be timing you for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, councillors, for taking the time today to consider this application. My name's Simon Rothwell. I am the Director of Policy and Strategy at Clearstone Energy. We're a British energy project developer. We've been building large-scale solar and battery projects connecting to the national grid since 2016. As the UK transitions to a new energy system powered by wind and solar, battery energy storage has a crucial role to play in delivering a secure and reliable electricity supply to homes and businesses. Without sufficient battery storage in the UK, we currently switch off wind farms when we've got more electricity than we need, and we turn on gas-fired power stations when we don't have enough electricity. In 2024, that saw renewable electricity that could have powered 2 million homes go to waste, and added more than £1 billion to UK energy bills. We talked a little bit about the Clean Power Action Plan. It's very clear that by 2030 we need 5 times as much battery storage capacity in the UK. We've also got regional targets, and if this project was consented, this would enable us to ensure we hit the East of England targets for battery capacity. We've engaged extensively with the local community and council officers over the last 2 years. We're very conscious that we're one of a number of proposed projects, and our proposals really do reflect the importance that we assess and minimise cumulative impact. We received pre-application planning advice from the council on 3 potential sites. This site was considered to reduce expansion outside and into the open countryside. In response to community input, we've made a series of changes to the proposal. We've added an earth bund underneath the hedging on the southern boundary of the site so that we increase screening in the early years after construction. We're proposing additional noise attenuation equipment to ensure that this project will generate no additional background noise at local properties. We're committed to routing construction traffic so it avoids local villages, and providing a community liaison officer to address any questions and concerns from the community. And we do really recognise concerns about battery safety. And we've worked extensively with fire safety experts to ensure that that is effectively managed with this site. Suffolk Fire and Rescue Service we've collaborated with. They are satisfied with the proposal, and should you grant consent, we are committed to working with them to finalise risk assessments and to do detailed emergency response planning. I've got the team here today to answer lots of questions, which I think is a good thing, including our fire safety expert and consultant, Joe Hassel.
Thank you. If there are questions and they're answered by your colleagues, if they just introduce themselves so we know who they are. Are there any questions of the applicant or his assistant? So I think Councillor Patchett, followed by Councillor Elkin, followed by Councillor Haddingham.
Hello, good evening. So, just a question about the noise attenuation equipment. So is that physical screens, or is that sort of an anti-noise sort of generator? Could you just explain how that actually works?
So it's the noisiest bits of kit on site are the inverters. They do the power conversion, DC to AC, and they will have special housings on them, which then basically contain the noise to the vicinity of the inverter itself. So our original proposal was that we would not increase background noise levels at local properties, and that was a cumulative assessment based on not just the projects that are operational now, but the ones that will be built, such as is it the Pigeon battery? So it includes all of the projects now and that will be built. And working with the environmental health officer, we've agreed to a lower limit, so we must be 5 decibels lower than background noise levels at local properties. That was what I was referring to in there.
Okay, did you want to come back?
Can I ask a second question? So happy to, thank you for that answer. Just one, I guess, now on the fire risk, which has been quite a sort of a big topic. So how do you what's your sort of counter to the obviously the council has said that there's only 2 hours worth of water, and that these type of fires have gone on longer than 2 hours. So how do you sort of, what is your plans for that? Do you plan to increase it, or do you think that 2 hours is enough for a sort of a big runaway fire?
So there is, can I just dispel the concept of a runaway fire? So yes, there are 600 battery units on site, but the purpose of the NFCC guidance and the spacing between battery units is to ensure that only one battery unit can ever catch fire, that fire cannot propagate between units, and that has been proven in all of the fire incidents, 3 in total, in the UK to date. Fire has not propagated between units, so I think we can rule out the risk that this fire will be a 600 battery unit fire, and we've committed to providing full-scale fire testing data for the system that's ultimately chosen for this. So that is the manufacturer burning a unit adjacent to other units to prove that this spacing is sufficient to ensure that there is no propagation. So if I can dispel that risk, and then could I introduce our fire safety consultant, Joe Hassel, as part of this, to just talk more generally about fire safety?
Hello, Joe Hassel. I was 31 years in the Fire and Rescue Service, retired as the Deputy Chief Fire Officer of Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service, and I currently teach and assess fire commanders on how to deal with fires and incidents. So regarding the tactics and the water, firstly, the National Fire Chiefs Council have initially, as the planning agent first said, set a kind of average amount of water that should be set. That's now been reduced because of some other fires that have occurred and the learning from those. This proposal will honour the initial National Fire Chiefs Council water supply. And the calculation of 2 hours seems to be a narrative as well. The limit's actually to do with the tactics that are basically used to fight the fire. So we wouldn't normally be using water to fight any of the fires. The way in which the units, the building, of course, this may change, the safety may improve in them. They have a 4-hour, essentially, fire protection, which stops them propagating. And the plan is to allow the batteries to burn out. It's much safer and easier for the battery to burn out. And the water is there really purely to protect the other units if it's needed. Will be part of the emergency response plan is that we'll have a unit on both entrances so that it measures all of the temperatures in all of the units so that they can be monitored the whole way through. If any of the units do start, the temperature starts to increase of the neighbouring units, then through a subject matter expert, Suffolk Fire and Rescue Service would have those conversations on whether or not to apply cooling. So the water that's on site has been calculated by the National Fire Chiefs Council, who are the experts. They're very comfortable, and we're actually going to go above that. No Fire and Rescue Service would be continually cooling anyway. It would be for a short period. They'd turn it off. They'd then monitor temperatures, check, then use it back again. So the 2 hours could extend to 4, 8, 10 hours, depending on what the tactics were used. Again, we would be working with Suffolk Fire and Rescue Service on all of those tactics through an emergency response plan.
Thank you. Councillor Elkin.
Thank you. I think it was just the second half of my question from earlier was about, in the event any water was used, if it had, how likely it would be to have any sort of contaminants in it and where it would be stored. How big is the attenuation pond? How much water can it store? Is it lined? What happens to any water that's contaminated?
Yep, so again, because it's very unlikely any water used will be contaminated because it should only be used for cooling of the surrounding cylinders, and the surrounding containers, and that's only if the temperatures reach a particular limit. If for some reason Suffolk Fire and Rescue Service do decide to put some water on the fire, there is enough containment within the site to contain all of the water that would be supplied, so 228,000 litres of water. That will be stayed on the site through penstock valves. That will be contained That will then be tested by specialists who will then determine whether or not it needs to be taken away for treatment or can then be released back into the normal drainage system. But as I said, it's unlikely that water will be used to fight the fire anyway, so those contaminants, it's highly unlikely that that would be going against NFCC procedures if they did that.
Thank you. Did you want to come back?
Just quickly, thank you. Is the attenuation basin lined?
I'll pick that up if that's right. Yeah, so the attenuation basin, in fact, the whole site is lined with an impermeable membrane capable of resisting temperatures and corrosion from acidic water. So everything is lined, everything is captured, and there is a valve on the outlet that's closed in the event of a fire, so we can contain everything on site. And just for, we will go through a process of final technology selection. As Bron said earlier, there is a new set of NFCC regulations on board. If more water supplies are required on site, there is adequate room for them, and the drainage containment system has room for 2 million litres of water. That's even after a 48-hour rainfall event. So, there are plenty of room on the site to flex up and down as required based on the technology that we choose and the current regulations at that point in time.
Thank you. Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you. I don't think this is not sort of planning related, but can the fire guy explain to me why batteries basically catch fire? Is it a fault? Is it the heat? Is it, you're basically saying if one battery is on fire, it wouldn't affect the one next to it getting, also, exploding and so on. Can you explain why they do, to explain to sort of idiots why they do catch fire? Thank you.
So it's a cell failure that causes thermal runaway. And most typically you'll see that with physical damage. So it may be at a recycling plant, or it might be an e-bike that's been poorly treated, or an e-scooter that's been poorly treated. So it's a cell failure, but that can also happen within charging and discharging of the battery. This sounds really crass, but there is no safer place to put a lithium-ion battery than in a air-conditioned, continually monitored steel container in terms of physical damage, in terms of monitoring for early signs of cell failure that could cause thermal runaway. Does that help?
Yeah, do you want to come back?
Yes, please. And so back in the day, they'd have probably put them in asbestos. But what are you saying that these days they can be sort of contained within? Is there something similar to that, but obviously much safer, that you can sort of box them in? Is there?
So the units that are on the indicative site plan from a Finnish company called Wärtsilä, I always struggle to pronounce that one correctly. They are 3-metre cubes, and within the cube there are racks of batteries. What we've been modelling is the worst case scenario where the plastic containers between the batteries and the suppression systems fail to stop thermal runaway spreading from cell to cell to cell within that battery. So our worst case scenario is that the whole unit goes up. But there is 4 hours worth of fire-rated insulation between the battery units and safe separation between the battery rows to ensure that fire won't spread. And so we work closely with Wärtsilä. They've shared with us their full-scale fire testing data. So they have burnt units within rows to prove, without any water being applied, without any defensive firefighting tactics being employed, that there is no propagation and there's no damage in the units adjacent. So that's what we are able to provide as part of this site safety report, but there's the same level of information that we'll provide when we make a final technology choice.
Did you coming back one more time?
So how far apart are they? One of the letters we've read this afternoon, which may or might not be true, they're saying you've got them closer than is historically, what's happened in the past. So how far apart are they, and is that usual?
So the specific guidance from the NFCC is that batteries should be spaced 6 metres apart unless a case can be made for spacing them closer together, and that is the provision of full-scale fire testing data. So what we've provided is an indicative layout based on the Vartsila units, which are manufactured for 3 metre spacing, and we've been able to provide the full scale fire testing data to support that. What we will do when we've made a final choice is adopt the manufacturer's spacing guidance for that particular technology, and that will be supported by full-scale fire testing data, and then we will take that to Suffolk Fire and Rescue Service for their approval.
Thank you. Councillor Warboys.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. You mentioned risk assessments earlier, and from what I've been listening to, you've identified the risks and extensive mitigation measures to meet those. I think the range of measures makes me start to think what is the probability of one of your battery units spontaneously combusting over the next 40 years? You've got 600 of them. How many are likely to be on fire in that time?
There are so many zeros in that 0.0000% that I haven't got it written down in front of me, but I'm very happy to provide that information for you. The risk is negligible.
But this is I'm trying to balance two things.
Yes.
The risk is negligible, but there's a range of measures.
Yes, because of the range of measures.
Risk. So,
because of the range of measures, I'm able to tell you that the risk is negligible.
So if those measures weren't taken, the risk of one of the batteries catching fire would be significantly greater? Is that what you're actually just saying?
It would be higher, but they are tested, they're protected in a way that other lithium-ion batteries are not, which is why we were able to give you that negligible risk.
Are you happy with the answer for now? Maybe you'll come back with something later.
I think this is a second or third battery installation, and we're getting more and more battery installations across the country. But we're also getting more fires. The last fire reported, I did check, it was in February this year in Tilbury.
I think we're heading towards a debate rather than a question.
I'm just.
Yeah. But anyway, save that up for later.
Okay.
Councillor Morgan, you had your hand up.
Yes, hello. I'm not sure if I'm actually allowed to ask this, but this is probable, or does Clearwater already have experience of a site of this size?
It's Clearstone Energy, and we're working across 10 battery projects, 4 of which are in this size, 400 megawatts.
Thank you.
And are those, the other battery installations, are they already operational, or are they still at an early stage like this one?
No, two of them are in construction. One is scheduled for construction in 2027, and the others either have planning consent or will have, hopefully, by the end of the summer.
Thank you. Councillor Elkin. Oh, did you want to come back, Councillor Morgan?
Just to say it is probable then, because it's not founded yet. Possible.
I'm not sure.
It hasn't been proved yet, everything, because there isn't an existing site of this size yet. They're all under construction or not yet working.
The largest site in the UK, I think, is a 300 megawatt battery in Black Hillock in Scotland, which went live a few months ago.
Right. Okay.
Risk can never be zero, anyway. You can't have a zero risk. There's always a risk of something happening. Councillor Elkin.
Thank you. It was on a slightly different tack. Obviously, the parish councils have made clear that they don't welcome this and they're feeling swamped by these sort of intensive energy projects. But one of the parish councils that we heard from did say if it does go ahead, could there be some community liaison with them, including on the landscaping design and choice of planting and things like that? Is that, you mentioned you've had some, you've had contact with them already, but would you be willing to, if it's approved, would you be willing to have a sort of formal community liaison during the build, consult them on what they'd like to see planted, heights of bunds, that kind of thing? Would that be a reasonable thing to ask?
Absolutely. And as you said, we have already engaged with Birstall and Bramford as part of this process, and we have, their input has informed some of the updates to the scheme, such as the bund underneath the planting on the southern side of the site. We've also talked about choices of species for hedgerow and woodland. So those conversations have already started, and we're happy to commit to continuing those should we be consented.
Thank you. Councillor Hardingham.
Thank you. Could we just clear up this issue about the noise measurement? We were assured by Birstall that no permission was granted by the owner of Birstall Hall for noise measurements to be carried out on the property. So what confidence have we got in the results of the noise assessment?
So the noise monitoring equipment was installed on the public footpath to the north of your property. So we were measuring at a closer distance, so effectively representing a higher noise than we would have received if we'd asked you for your permission to install measuring equipment at the hall. But it was direct line of sight between the hall and the proposed facility. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. Entirely separate question, if I can ask it. The planting of a hedge or trees on top of a bund concerns me somewhat, as a grower myself. Obviously, if you raise a bund, then that ground is going to be, by its nature, drier than it would otherwise in the event of a shortage of rain, and it's going to be critical to do everything that you can to get rapid growth and good establishment of plants, so as to get as soon as possible to a point where the site is screened adequately. Will you be installing trickle irrigation, for instance, on the bund for the trees and hedges that are planted on it, to make sure that they are regularly watered and never run short? And this is particularly important early in the season, really, because you have to get onto it in April, May time to make sure they don't suffer and root growth is restricted.
Yeah, having just nursed a new hornbeam hedge into life, I totally understand that. And I'm not an expert here, but I will pass on to one of my colleagues. James?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. James Nichol, I'm the Head of Planning at Clearstone Energy. One of the conditions that will be in the report is for a habitat management plan, and that will be very detailed in exactly what you're talking about. So the first probably 3 years are absolutely critical for any of the new planting on the site. We actually did look at doing some more mature planting on the bund, but for the very reasons that you just explained, it doesn't take very well in those situations. So again, we're happy to liaise with the council on the details of the habitat management plan as we go into the detailed design as well. And with the irrigation point, I think that's something we'll take on board and certainly include in the future iteration of it.
Thank you. Any further? No. Any further questions of the applicant? Councillor Patchett?
Thank you, Chair. Am I right in thinking the energy that is going into these batteries is coming from the sort of the offshore turbines exclusively, and it's not coming in from anywhere else on the grid? Is that right?
The onshore the offshore wind onshore substations are directly connected to the same substation, so the likelihood is that the energy that would go into the battery would come from those offshore wind farms, but it is connected to the substation, which is connected to the wider network. So I can't hand on heart say that all of the energy that goes in there is going to come from those wind farms, but that is the purpose. It's there to provide that ability to manage the flow of electricity from those offshore wind farms onto the grid to meet demand from homes and businesses.
Councillor Elkin? Oh, did you want to come back?
Yeah, just because I was under the impression that like the Bramford substation was kind of at its capacity, because we've got we got our Gateway 14 development, and we can't have full solar on the roof of our buildings because the grid cannot receive that amount of electricity. So has there been an upgrade to the Bramford substation, or are you still within the parameters of what it can currently take?
No, we have a confirmed bay at the substation. So we've been down and met with National Grid and looked at the bay that our project will plug into. There is capacity at the substation, particularly for a battery, which effectively takes load off the network when there's too much, and puts it back on when there's not enough. So it doesn't add, and they are evaluated separately to generation for that reason.
Councillor Elkin.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick ones. With the, I think it was a permitted path along the side of the site. I was just a landscaping question. I know people hate walking past, things that look like prison yards with those big metal fences. I can't quite remember what the landscaping was showing, so I just wondered if you could describe what's going to be protecting the public right-of-way, what's going to be planted there.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Tom Bevan, Development Manager. So the existing footpath that's in place running along the southern side of the site will be, there'll be vegetation on the northern side of that, screening the footpath from the main site. And then as you head southeast, and it becomes a permissive footpath, that basically follows the boundary of the existing field. And that follows the field south and west, leading to Bullen Wood. So that adds the connectivity.
Can I just ask?
Did you want to come back?
What does vegetation mean? Are we talking about little tiny whips, or?
There are trees and shrubs, and some hedgerow. But again, the final sort of landscaping plan will be determined by condition. But that's the scheme that we've put forward at the moment.
And is that going to be planted? I mean, sometimes we've had cases where we've been able to ask for things to be planted in advance of construction just to get things started and get the screening coming up more quickly. What's the sort of scheduling like for that?
I mean, planting is due to take place when we begin construction of the site, which isn't for a few years' time. Our legal agreement with the landowner is such that we only take a lease of the site when we're ready to build the project, so that they can continue to farm the whole of that field until 2028 when we're ready to build.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Hardingham and Councillor Morgan.
Thank you. Yeah, just a technical point, really, just out of interest. It's rated as a 400 megawatt battery store. Does that refer to the rate of charge and discharge, or to the total storage capacity in megawatt hours?
No, that's megawatts as in export and import capacity. Megawatt hours is the number of hours that we can deliver that for.
So that's 2 hours, is it? So the capacity is 800 megawatt hours?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan.
Hello, not being an engineer, I don't know the mechanics exactly, but if this permission is granted, so you're a storage area for this energy, but how does the energy get to these storage batteries in the first place? And then actually, once it's being stored, we haven't actually talked about, or I don't have a knowledge of, how it then gets dispersed, how it then gets delivered elsewhere. And would that not interrupt locals as well? Would that be additional planning required for that? Or is that all included in this application?
So the batteries are connected to Bramford National Grid substation via an underground power cable. When the battery's charging, it draws energy from the substation into the batteries. There are a series of conversion steps that happen. So current is reduced down in voltage from the 400,000 volts of the Bramford substation down to 33,000 volts. And then there are inverters which handle the conversion between alternating current, which is what our homes run on and the National Grid runs on, and the batteries, which are direct current. So they handle that shift in between AC and DC frequency. And then the reverse happens when the energy is required to go back onto the grid.
It uses the same facility. It's not, you don't have to have an inlet and an outlet.
No, it's one cable.
And some of those containers, the things that we saw on the thing, are the inverters, and as well as the actual batteries are in different size boxes.
Yes, yeah. So the first picture was of the batteries, but that's the Fartzilla batteries. But whatever we put on will be painted green. Just to be clear. The second pictures were of the inverter and then the transformer, the medium voltage skid, as Bron referred to it as, and then the final picture was what they look like together when they're joined up, so they sit next to the batteries.
Councillor Marriott.
So will it not be storing energy from the solar farms as well? Is it just offshore wind?
They will also, so you've got the ENSO scheme and the EDF scheme, which I think are about 80 megawatts together. So that will feed into the substation, but the biggest contribution of energy at Bramford is offshore wind. That's almost 3,000 megawatts. So there's a lot more. So it's entirely possible that the solar electrons will go into the battery, but it's more likely to be wind.
Okay, I think we're about done with questions. Thank you very much for your time. So we now got the ward member, Councillor James Caston. So you can make your comments now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Clearstone have consulted well through this process. I think I'm not disputing that this is an important project, and we potentially need it. But I just see, no matter how important the infrastructure, when you've got these kind of resources, I don't know why we're looking at an app with so many gaps in it, so many bits that aren't quite right, or we'll take your word for that. I find it really difficult, like going back to I fully support what Birstall Parish Council and Bramford Parish Council have said. I think the Dormouse and Newt situation, I do have big concerns that this survey doesn't go far enough. I know it's a survey, it's been done, and it needs to be, that's all we've got. But it just doesn't seem robust enough to me. The Parish Council also talk about the Rochdale envelope, which it just makes the whole application so uncertain about environmental impacts and unforeseen issues. It makes this app really complex because a lot of it we can't actually see. I can't see a lot of value. I can't see a lot of noise reduction improvements happening due to the Rochdale envelope. They might come with the technology, but to me it says these are likely to be more dense batteries and create more power, or more efficient for what they are. These are things that we're not even going to touch on because we don't know, because this Rochdale envelope, but that is what it is. With noise, again, we've been assured that noise isn't going to be too much of an issue. It's a shame that these noise levels actually look at the nuisance to a person, not the nuisance to wildlife or things around there. But I've got a similar site on the other side of the Bramford substation. It was approved in exactly the same way with the same level of noise predicted. So that site at 2 o'clock in the morning makes the same amount of noise as a combine harvester working. I've heard it myself. I've been through there finishing work, and I thought, what is that noise? Is somebody still working? This is harvest. And that wasn't covered in the application. It was deemed to be not going to make a noise, not going to bother people. The fire issue, the fact that we don't have enough water on the site to deal with a major incident, it would need to be left to burn out. Just imagine if the wind is going to my parish of Bramford, or Birstall, or there's nothing we can do about that. But we're told it doesn't matter that we don't have enough water, because we're just going to let it burn until it goes out. Having a lining to capture the water, because we're concerned about how contaminated the water's going to be that's been on this, but yet if it goes into the air, it's not a problem. It's just a considerable worry with this. I think the process these guys have done has been, it's been a good one. They've spoken to the community, but we don't ask for enough with these planning applications. I just think we're not thorough, and we're not robust enough when we look at this. There's so much resource and money available for these things. We should be getting things absolutely right, and everyone in this room should sit there quite happy to know that everything that can be done has been done. And I just don't think we've got that in this paper. But so yes, that's my opinion, and I'll leave it with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Councillor Caston? Councillor Elkin.
Thanks. It was just about the noise. You mentioned experiencing the noise coming off another similar site. Was that a BESS as well? Was it? Yeah, if you could just tell us about.
So on the other side of this site, on the Floaton side, there's a battery storage facility. And I obviously work in Somersham and Floaton, finished work late, and walking home, I thought, what is that noise? Is somebody still working? Have I stopped combining too early? Is someone still going? And the next morning I spoke, and a local told me that was the battery storage site. And when it gets hot, fans start up, and it does that in the middle of the night. It does that all the time. It's not covered at all in the planning application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you. So I will now open this item up for debate. Anyone like to make a start? Councillor Patchett.
Yeah, both Jameses. I would like to go first, purely because I am quite in two minds about this one. So, I would like to be persuaded or dissuaded by my sort of fellow committee members, because I do understand we need battery storage to blend the grid when we've got renewable sources. So I understand we do need it. So that's, I do understand the need. But I think we've got, like Councillor Caston said, there's a few sort of elements that are sort of missing, and that there are a few things, especially with the 3 metres versus the 6 metre gap between containers. We're taking your word for it, and I know there's another company elsewhere in Europe, that assures us that our regulations aren't correct and that you can narrow it down to 3 metres. There's the ecology reports as well. Is the amount of water correct? can we receive that water? Will that water be safe to sort of pump back into the aquifer, which Ipswich relies on? I think there are a few sort of question marks on it. And I do understand that the battery storage is important. So I think, you know, I don't want to kind of reject the application, but, you know, is there scope to sort of defer it so that we could get solid 100% answers on all the questions that have been raised by the parish, both parishes, been raised by the ward member, and also by the public comments as well, you know. So this is my first battery application, and I don't feel, and I know probably more than the layperson about batteries, but I don't feel I know enough to actually make an informed decision. So perhaps I feel that I need some more information or more persuasion. So that's where I am.
Thank you. Councillor Haddingham, did you want to make a comment?
Thanks. I don't think I'm going to make James any happy with this, James, because I also am torn. Like you say, we're being told, you know, you've been very convincing that it's all going to be safe and that, you know, that there's not going to, you know, that everything can be contained. But I wouldn't want to live next to one, I will say, you know, which is you know, and so I'm also torn, thinking, you know, this technology is so new that all these you know, desktop surveys that are done, you know, it's all theory, you know, and that we're even being told that they don't want to show us how it's going to look because they don't actually know how it is going to look. And so, yeah, unfortunately, you know, I'm all over the place as well.
Thank you. Councillor Warboys?
Yes, I don't think I'm going to clarify this at all. But what you said, there's no such thing as no risk. And I think we need to be perhaps discuss an acceptable risk as part of the balance against public benefit, because there is undoubtedly public benefit from battery storage systems. And I do accept that the technology has improved dramatically because the number of incidents relative to battery storage systems has gone down in comparison with the growth in energy systems. So they are getting safer, but they're not zero risk. So whether that's acceptable or not, this is a question in my head. Our planning officer, Brett, did talk about accumulative risks. There's more battery storage systems in the immediate neighbourhood. There's also a substation which, from what I've heard in the news, is extremely unlikely to set on fire, but apparently it's just happened. So there's the risk of major fire incidents in that area is growing. And I'm starting to think in terms of, would I put a gunpowder factory next to a gas storage system, next to an oil refinery in the same area? So it's that accumulated risk in that area added to the access issues, where you've got limited access. And I'm not even going to sort of add into it, because it's probably outside planning, whether the local fire service has got enough engines to deal with more than one major incident in the area. So I think that where that accumulated risk, the level of that accumulated risk with the potential risk and the acceptable risk, that's the issue really for me. I think work has been done on biodiversity. We've got minimum standards for that. It would be beneficial, I think, if the local community was involved better in that. And I think that can be done in our conditions. It's very difficult, because I think someone mentioned I would like to live next to her. We're making a decision here, and we're going to have to live with the consequences, even if it's happening in Bramford. And deciding whether or not that's livable with, that we have made a decision with regard that this is an acceptable risk with regard to the public benefits. Does that?
I think you've actually summed it up quite well. It is all about the risk relative to other risks as well, and putting that, whether it's worth having this risk, given the benefits of it. But maybe I have a very skewed version of risk, because there have been a number of accidents on the A14 in the last couple of weeks. It seems like it's almost like every other day. So there's a risk of having an accident every time you drive on the A14, but it doesn't seem to stop people driving. As a non-driver, I think people often underestimate the risk of driving on a motorway or the A14, and they will overestimate the risk of this because it's an unknown technology. And I actually understand what this Rochdale approach means. I actually wish we could do it on all our housing developments, because we so often have an outline planning permission where we've tied the developer to put in gas boilers or whatever, and the text moved on and we're not doing gas boilers anymore, but that's what the outline said and we can't change it. So the very fact that we have got this flexibility, and given that I think one of your gentlemen said it wasn't going to be started till 2028, well, who knows what battery tech will have done by then. So in a way, I'm glad we're not tying you down to 2025 battery technology if you're not actually going to be installing it till 2028, because the engineering and the materials used in the batteries will have moved on significantly in 3 years' time. So I think that's. I know it does mean it's more uncertain, and I would like to. I mean, there was some comment about the amount of power. If we can, if the application is for the size of the development in terms of its physical size, but if we can also put a limit on the energy capacity, because if tech has moved on in 3 years and this physical size of development could actually now deal with twice as much energy capacity, then maybe we've got more of a fire risk. So I think if we are going to approve this, I think we do need to tie down and put a maximum power, because the more power you've concentrated into those batteries, the hotter they're likely to get and the more likely they are to cause a problem. And I also, the other thing I tear my hair out about really is Bramford substation, I presume, was just put there historically just because it happened to be a good place to put a substation. But now we seem to be so tied down with all of these energy applications, the solar farms and these battery storages, all having to be really close to Bramford, which has a very, very Suffolk open skies, agricultural landscape, and we're suddenly putting these industrial things in the middle of them, just on the basis of the fact that they're next door to the Bramford substation. And I really hope that in the future, when we need a new substation, we actually think more carefully about where that substation is going to go, because of all the other associated infrastructure that's going to end up right next to it. And that has clear, we've got tiny little lanes going up to this plateau of agricultural, wide open spaces, and we're going to plonk a horrible looking industrial fence. I'm glad you've changed the fence. I really didn't like the palisade fence. So thank you for changing it to a mesh fence. And there have been concerns raised about the screening adjacent to the footpath. But if we're going to have some sort of liaison with the parish, I think that's something that they would want to input into anyway. I don't think we should be dictating what sort of screening they have next to a footpath that they're going to use. So if there is going to be liaison, I think we need to leave that open for some discussion and making sure that they're happy with whatever is put there. But anyway, that's just my thoughts. I'm not making any proposals or anything, but I do think we need to put risk into perspective. And it does sound to me, I mean, because battery tech is sort of all the in thing, I think there has been quite a lot of studies on runaway fires from batteries, and we hear, and they do seem to be, every time there's something happens with a battery fire, the media jump up and down a lot and say, like all e-bikes are unsafe, when that clearly isn't the case, and it's always a bad news story that hits the press. So, but there's a little bit of unknown here because we haven't got any others. Your company haven't got any that are up and running to give us some anecdotal evidence of how safe they really are. But anyway, I'll let someone else waffle on. I've been prattling on for too long. Councillor Elkin.
Thank you. Now, similar to everyone else, kind of somewhat can see pros and cons. I mean, obviously we need the power, but all the concerns that everybody else has expressed already. I was going to ask, with the noise side of things, if it would be reasonable to have a condition such that, if this is approved, that if it's noisier than everybody's expecting, if it's churning out the sort of noise that Councillor Caston's describing, whether there could be further mitigation measures asked for. Is that something that would be reasonable, or is it covered already? And
I'll hope Gemma can answer that.
Sorry, bear with me a second, Chair. My report's not loading for some reason. There we go. I was just going to double check whether there was anything in the conditions already, because I have to admit I can't remember. I can't spot it. I don't know if we've got Bron. George, condition number in the list by any chance?
Sorry, can you just remind me what we're talking about?
So noise,
The
noise condition.
Yeah. Sorry, it is on page...
Was it 21? Operational noise verification and attenuation as required.
That's it. Yeah, on page 38, right at the top. So condition 21. So that's quite a standard condition. That's on the EDF one as well. So once installed an operational professional assessment to verify the level of noises as expected in the assessment, and if not, a further attenuation to meet what was in the assessment is installed once agreed with your environmental protection officer.
so that's covered already. Thank you. And it does concern me a bit about the fact that we're using grade 2 land. I know it's not a huge number of hectares, but we're having so many of these projects, and each one is just a bit more farmland, just a bit more grade 2 or grade 3A. We're one of the country's main agricultural producers, and we're seeing this stuff nibbled away at all the time. But yeah, that I think is concerning. And the fact it's next to one of our very few remaining bits of ancient woodland. So I hope everything that can be done is going to be done to look after that and not encroach on it any further. Yeah, I'm still mulling.
Councillor Hardingham.
Thank you. Similar to other committee members, I have confidence in our officers being able to impose conditions which will ensure adequate planting and I hope rapid growth of planting, so this is done as well as possible. And I have noticed the noise condition, which reassured me that it'll be tested afterwards. On the risk issue, I think perhaps I'm minded to come down in favour, because I think that we've got to jump one way or the other, and I think technology will get better as time goes on, and I think that's where the balance of the decision will probably need to come, but I'll leave it to other members to comment.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to make any comments or make any contributions to the debate or come up with a proposal? Councillor Hanningham.
I would just say that what you said actually about risk, and driving on the A14, the other day I think there was 5 accidents, and yet guess what I'm doing on the way after here, and also my son has just bought a house that's off grid, and to connect it to the UK power networks was eye-wateringly expensive, and so he's going to get solar panels and have a battery storage unit, and clearly next to his house, and so. Well, it's really tricky. Anyway, I'm still floating, but I'm really hoping someone else will propose it. No.
Any further comments? Councillor Patchett?
Can I just ask a question for clarity to perhaps you or maybe the governance officer? What actually happens in the event that a majority of councillors were to abstain and not for or against? What happens in that situation?
Well, I think it's just on the number of who've actually voted, isn't it?
if you had, if you had 2 for and 1 against and 5 abstentions, that would be a majority, whatever way it went. And if everybody abstained, it would be a bit of a mess. But I mean,
So as long as of the voting members, the people who aren't abstaining, and there's a majority of those, then it could still go one way or the other. Councillor Hardingham.
Well, I have just got another thought, which is about Bullen Lane. And do we know whether it's a single-track lane or not? And if so, how does that affect the response of emergency services were something to happen? Have we got any?
I think it is a single-track lane, but maybe we can ask Bron.
Yes, it's double width all the way to the point of the access to the National Grid substation, where it gets a little narrower and a little bit uneven. But up to and past the point of the site, both site accesses, it's double width. And there are HGVs and large pieces of equipment moving to and from the farms up there and the substation on a fairly regular basis.
I presume that answers your question then, Councillor Hardingham.
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else wish to make any further comment? Councillor Marriott?
I'd just say it isn't a wide road. It's it's a little bit more than a single track, but.
Has it got white lines down the middle? Does it have white lines down the middle?
No.
Councillor Hardingham?
Well, I don't think that not making a decision is an option. We're here to make a decision, we have to do it. So I'm going to propose that we we accept the application as it stands.
And did you want to add any further conditions? I think there was a condition that was suggested in the late papers, and I've also made the suggestion that we might want to limit the maximum power output.
I've made various notes, if I share those and see if you're content.
Do we need to find a seconder first?
Could you just clarify, are you talking about the maximum power stored in the batteries or the maximum charge and discharge
energy
rate?
Energy capacity, I think,
right.
is what we need, because it's the energy capacity which will, as I understand it with my background, it's the energy capacity which is the kilowatt hours. And if you want more storage, you need more batteries. So if the battery tech becomes better and we can store more energy in a smaller volume, we want to limit the energy capacity, I believe, if I've got the idea right. Anyway,
Yeah, which I take it is 800 megawatt hours.
Yeah. But anyway, I think we need to find a seconder. Is anyone willing to second? Well, I'll second if nobody else will. I'm happy to second that as long as we have the extra conditions. Councillor Elkin.
Sorry, this is just a question. Are we doing the right thing if we're limiting if the technology gets better and they can produce the same amount of power with less batteries, is not allowing them to have more on site, meaning we're just going to have to put more somewhere else, or?
But if it's the increased energy capacity will increase the thermal capacity as well. So if you've got more dense energy, I would imagine you're more likely to have increased temperature rise.
Is that?
But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, that's what I was going to say, Chair. Like, with respect, are you qualified to actually make that statement? Because we probably have some experts here that can.
Expert, but
they could probably actually, before we put that condition in, should we not hear from them about that exact sort of condition?
Yeah, maybe we can ask the experts.
A higher density battery would have a greater risk of thermal runaway. My understanding is that that's not the case at all. It's simply the design of the battery to enable to get more batteries in. I don't believe it's. I can commit to coming back to you on that one. but I don't believe it increases the risk.
Gemma?
Just thinking a couple of options available for you, Chair, which is we could add a fairly loose restriction by condition, which Bron and I could then take away to agree. So something like the maximum energy capacity restricted, and that allows us some capacity to work it up. Or if you're not content with that, I do note that condition 4, which agrees the Rochdale envelope, does set out restrictions that they've got to agree the battery tech, the design, the dimensions with us when they get to that point. So we would always have that agreed. It doesn't specifically restrict the amount of energy, but we would be agreeing what it would look like. So if things have moved on in terms of fire or spec or any of the various things, we would be able to review that at the time. So if closer is fine, great. If it's not, we would be able to look at that at the time. So there are a couple of options there, just as a thought, Chair.
That sounds pretty reasonable to me. Councillor Harding?
Yeah, I don't feel it's for us to preempt what HSE and other expert bodies are going to come up with ruling on future developments in technology. So I think we can probably rely on them to come up with the best possible safety standards.
Paul Boys, did I see you waving hands?
Yeah, well, two things I'd like to say. The first one is I think I agree with Councillor Erling. If there's newer technology, it may well increase the capacity of the battery, but it may also be safer. I don't think the two things are necessarily related. I think the next one is a bit of a question. In a meeting in the past, I was somewhat grilled about what's reasonable for us to do as a planning committee and what we can ask. And I think the reasonable risk comes into that and what we can expect. And I think the question is for Gemma or Bron, if she's still there, is whether the cumulative risk is whether it's reasonable to add this into the equation as well, put it on the balance pan or whatever. Simply because, you know, I'm quite gloomy a lot of the time, and I've got this scenario in my head of with the driest part of the country, this long, hot, dry summer, which is putting the air conditioning in the units under maximum pressure, and the fire service is trying to put the fire out in someone's field, and someone's burned the sheds down, and then we have one of these cells go up in flames, and there's a finite probability that it might. And that's where I think I'm talking about accumulative effects, and whether we've actually really put enough of that into the equation, or can.
So I suppose at the moment there are some regulations with the Fire Chief's document, and that's gone out to our Suffolk County Council Fire and Rescue Services, who have accepted that this achieves that guidance, and they've raised no objection. So I'm having difficulty saying there's a risk or a concern there, because the specialists in fire and rescue have said they're okay with it, and they will have worked on the basis of, we know other things happen. This, you know, one battery has a risk, every house has a risk, field fires has a risk, the cars on the A14 we've talked about several times today, they would be involved in something like that, so they will be aware of where they can distribute their resources to and the risks. So yeah, no, in terms of that, County Fire and Rescue are content, but I appreciate we are a little bit into the unknown on some of those things, but that's why we've been out to these various consultees who have confirmed their acceptability. Again, I think we'd cover this in the Rochdale envelope, but if members wanted to put something specific about an update to the fire water mitigation scheme to be agreed at that time, so if things have moved on one way or another, we can update accordingly. So if more water is required, we can do that. You've had the applicant say that that was something that was a possibility. So if we want to review that at the time, then I think I'd be happy to add that by condition if members were content.
Yeah. I do think... Sorry, can I...
Yeah, you go first.
I do think the fire service do have contingency plans for various industrial sites where there's a storage of chemicals and things. Is it reasonable to ask that they take such measures?
I was going to say, I was going to ask if the fire service had been consulted now and they're happy with it, but of course the tech will have moved on. So yes, I would like that when you get the precise detail with the Rochdale envelope idea, that the fire service are re-consulted to make sure that they are still happy with whatever the final design is. I think that should be part of the condition. I'm not quite sure whether we can demand the fire service have a contingency plan for the battery. Is that what you're asking?
I think more or less.
Yeah, I'm not sure we've got. I don't think we've got that power to demand what the fire officer does.
No, happy that what I've sort of written down is fire mitigation scheme to be reviewed as part of condition 4, including consult with the fire service.
Councillor Elkin.
It wasn't me, I know we're into debate, but I've just seen hands waving back there, so I don't know if there's any potential.
Is this in response to one of the queries we've got?
I just wanted to clarify that there is a condition in the list of conditions around a battery safety management plan, which is something that is developed in consultation with Suffolk Fire and Rescue Service. It includes risk assessments, includes the final detailed design and an assessment of the site by the Fire and Rescue Service, and it includes that emergency response plan that you're talking about, which has all of that contingency planning in it. And we've committed to updating that on an annual basis. So it would have to be approved by yourselves in consultation with the Fire and Rescue Service before we could start operations, and it would have to be updated on a yearly basis, which just means that if things change, whether that's the surrounding environment or whether it's the rules and regulations, that we're able to adapt to them, and you can be sure that they are adapted to.
I think, if I'm right, that is condition 15. Maybe Gemma can just confirm. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for that. When we've got a whole long list of them, we're not quite sure exactly what they all mean. Is there any further comment on the proposal? Can we just get Gemma to read out what it is we're actually voting on then before I ask the Governance Officer?
Great, thank you, Chair. So we're looking at approving as the recommendation, which is on pages 37 to 38, with additional conditions. So this confirms that it would be the mesh fencing rather than palisade. That condition 4 will confirm that the proposal complies with the latest guidance and regulations and a community liaison scheme to be agreed, but not the fire condition, because that's already dealt with by 15. I hope that covers everything.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Hardingham?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm happy with that as a seconder. So I'm going to ask the Governance Officer to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress on ModGov. Thank you, Chair. That makes 5 votes for and 3 against, so that is carried.
Thank you. We are now at the end of our agenda at item number 8, which is site inspection. Are there any further requests for site inspections?
No requests.
No, but we do have a site inspection next Wednesday, which you should all have been notified about. So the next meeting of Mid Suffolk Planning Committee will be on Wednesday the 9th of April at 9:30 a.m. in the Council Chamber. So I'm going to close the meeting at 19:32. Thank you very much.